Everyone, my name's Kate Mason and I'm a member of Community Services Speak Out. We're a group of welfare workers who are concerned about government COVID-19 measures and decided to form together to advocate and raise awareness of the effects on vulnerable clients. I'm delighted to have here with us today Pamela Robinson, who's going to speak to us about her role, the role she did and why she took why she left the work she was doing. So Pamela was the manager of a men's domestic violence perpetrator program. So welcome, lovely to have you here. And if we can just hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Okay. So my name's Pam Robertson. I have been in the field for about 17 years in total in working with domestic violence in the men's space. And I have had numerous roles in that field of work. I recently left my job and due to requirements of the position that I was not prepared to take. And so I'm here today as a person who doesn't have paid employment, but I'm very strongly wanting to speak about what happened and about the COVID issues throughout the DV sector in the last 2 years.
And can you explain what you did in your role?
So in my most recent role, I was a manager of the Men's Perpetrator Intervention Program. So what my role, I was training facilitators, facilitating groups, doing all the day-to-day management of a team, doing clinical supervision with the team. I actually was involved in 2 research projects in the last few years, so I've had quite a lot happening in the space. So I was very involved in what we call the SPEAK network, which was the Specialist Practitioners Against the Elimination of Violence, and that's in Queensland. So I was co-convener on that for the last 12 months. So I was more than a manager of a program. I had quite an invested interest in the whole sector in Queensland.
Okay. And what brought you into that line of work?
So I originally my first job was in working in an NGO in North Queensland, working with families whose children were at risk of entering child protection. So I did get quite an exposure in those early days of the effects on most families around domestic and family violence and the potential of children being removed from families. I mean, there's a very much a correlation. And in some of these families, there was, sexual abuse allegations as well. So we did an intervention program with families, and we were trying to keep them out of the child protection system, in terms of removal. So that was in the early days. And then I was able to secure a position in a prison at a facility west of Mareeba in North Queensland. And that's where I delivered programs for men. There was sexual offending programs, violence programs. There was drug and alcohol programs. There was quite a number. That was where I started doing that work with men in particular. And so from there, I came down to Brisbane and had other jobs in the men's space.
Okay, and then went into domestic violence, the perpetrator program.
Yeah.
So you've basically seen it from all different positions, haven't you?
Yeah, I have, and I think that's what I also saw was that there was a huge gap in the work with men. We gradually have seen a breakdown of family, and family is the basis of community. And I'm very strongly, saying that if we don't build families, we're not going to build communities or cities or countries. That's where we've got to go. And so there was a huge gap working with men, and there weren't a lot of people skilled in the area. So for me, it was like, well, this is my opportunity. I've raised 3, and I want to say good men. Maybe I didn't do it all right. Maybe I was not, I made mistakes, but I think that by and large, this idea that men need to be able to know who they are and need to know who they are in themselves, not what society tells them to be. And I think that that's been a real issue, that men have lost that understanding of who they are, and they've floundered for a long time.
So that was what led you to want to keep working in the male space, because it is a less worked in area, isn't it? Still now it's more specialised, or not more specialised, but it's specialised as well.
It is, but I think people are afraid of it in some sense. There are women's domestic violence services. There's support for women. I mean, there is certainly not enough resources, and I'm not going to go down that track. But for men, if they don't, if they're the ones that are wanting to be, to have influence over their children in their homes and be positive role models, but they've never learnt that, or they've never seen it in their own lives, we just got this cycle that keeps going. And these men, as I've worked with them, they've said, I want to be a good dad, I want to be a good partner, I don't know how to do it. And all I know is anger, because that's what I'm told I have to be, angry, or nothing. I can't feel anything. All I can feel is anger. So that was really an eye-opener for me.
So because a lot of people don't understand what the welfare industry looks like and how we work, and it is different from each sector as well. So even if we're in one sector, we may not understand another sector. Or so when you're working with these men as part of a perpetrator program, that is to help them identify other ways of, as you're talking about, sort of mentoring, showing other ways that you can be in the world and respond to conflict or disturbance, or how would you help about that?
That's partly it. But I think for us, the way we ran our program, we were trying to identify beliefs that drive behaviour. So we're always looking for, we used a process which is called logging, and we identified actions. So in the home, what were the actions that led to these events that you've been caught, you have orders against you over? And so we look at these actions and intentions, and then we're looking at the beliefs that drive it. So when a man believes that he's king of the castle, for example, everything he does comes out of that belief. So if I'm king of the castle, she's going to have to do what I say. I'm not going to let her have control of money. I'm not going to let her make decisions. So we challenge those beliefs. We say, where did you learn that? How do you know that that has worked for people in your life prior? Like, did it work for your father? Did it work for your grandfather? So we're always looking for the links of where these beliefs came from, which then exposes why the behaviour happens. And I think that, there are some programs where they would focus more on mentoring and drug and alcohol. They're all things that have to happen as well. What we were trying to identify specifically was what's driving the behaviour, because when you can unpack that and challenge that, then they start to critically think, because we want them to think about the why behind their actions. Yeah.
And what effects did you see of the program on some of the men?
So we wouldn't have kept doing it if it didn't work. We had men disclose that things had changed, and what we always looked at success through the women's voice. So if the women's advocate, which is part of the program, you have to have a women's advocate contacting the partners and ex-partners and things. And if a woman's voice, if she says, I feel safer, if she says he's changing, if she says that our home is actually much more calm, then that's our measure of success. We can get self-disclosures from him, but we can't go like, we're all going to make ourselves look good. That's humanity, okay? So we can't just go on his word. And I would check in with them, a month, 2 months after program and see what's happening. And we're talking about lifelong behaviours that don't change overnight. So we may only sow a seed in a very short time, but over time, that seed can root and implant, and they can think about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And it does create some behaviour change. Yeah.
So you've already made the link, but I'll make it again. You've made the link between domestic violence and then children, and it's not 100%, of course, we're not saying that, but the link between domestic violence and children ending up in the care system. If it's left unabated.
Yeah.
And how many years, I know you said it, but how many years did you work in this particular role?
So I've been doing the men's work specifically for 15 years. I've been in the sector about 17, 18 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you seem very passionate about the work you do.
Yeah. And I don't even know that I like the word passionate. I think what it is for me is that it is a vocation that I feel called to, and I believe I've got skills and knowledge now that I don't want it to go to waste. So I really, I'm looking now at what's next and how do I still stay in this space.
So in the lead up to, do you want to speak to what happened within your organisation, the COVID-19 mandatory vaccination policy rollout, and why you were concerned, the lead up around that?
We've got a 2-year lead up, so to speak. In the 2 years of the COVID issues, I guess briefly, we started an online program and did wrote up all the findings of that and looked at safety aspects and things. So we actually were developing something different as well in that space. We also had to be really creative in being able to check on women's safety. So we did all sorts of things like, had men come in to get fuel vouchers while we went and checked on the women, and we did all sorts of things to be sure that we were doing safe as possible practice. So in terms of the COVID-19, we were being innovative, and I believe that, from my perspective, we were pushed into an innovation space, and that has been a good thing in one sense. Now, for me, the organisation had said basically for the 2 years that they would never mandate a medical procedure on their staff. And they said that unless our funding was dependent upon it. So if the government had have said, we won't give you funding unless all your staff are vaccinated and have the medical procedure, then they said to me that's when they would make it mandatory. Well, over the course of time, that never happened. The government never made our funding mandatory. What did happen was that there was some people in the organisation who, and my terms are fearmongers. I mean, I have never worn a mask, and I've never been concerned for my health. I never, I take care of my health. And one of my concerns was if I took this medical procedure, that would have ill health, because I just don't agree with something that hasn't been tried and tested. So when I was thinking about the process of how all this happened, it got to the point where there was even a psychologist sent to me for me to see a psychologist so that I could talk to them about how I felt about all this. And the psychologist, I was, the more I found out about the truth behind the whole thing and the agenda, the more I realised that we're absolutely being lied to, and I remember saying to the psychologist, I feel like my whole life's been a lie. And she said to me, oh, that's dissociation. And I said, no, it's the bleep, bleep, bleep truth. I'm like, this is the reality of what's coming to the fore. And when the psychologist spoke to the people in the organisation and said, oh, she's not going to get the jab. And then I said, you what? You spoke to them about me? Like, it was, to me, it felt like it was all going to be coerced. And again, I work in a space with men. We talk about coercion, we talk about gaslighting, we talk about manipulation, we talk about no choice and no right. So we talk about all that stuff, and they were doing that to me. And I thought, this can't, nothing sat well with me. And I said to the organisation, I will not, under any circumstances, take this procedure. I said, I will not. I said, I want a safety data sheet. I want information to know what happens if my health goes downhill, and none of my questions were answered, none of them. And then towards the end, they put out a survey. I was sent on leave because my mental health wasn't great. I was on leave, a survey went out. Only 66% of the staff responded to that survey, and they said that they were going to make it mandatory based on the responses. So it wasn't even a full cohort of the organisation. And then they also said that the organisation, the board voted unanimously to mandate. And I'm like, no, they didn't, because I know some people weren't there when the vote was on. So they rushed out all this legal process of consultation, survey, and I believe every organisation just did this tokenistic information. I sent letters to the CEO in regards to the safety. I sent letters in regards to who's liable, like all these questions. Nothing was answered. And when I finally sent a last email, and I said, none of my questions have been answered. Would you please respond? And they just wrote back and said, we can't. So that was a shock to me. And I thought, this is bigger than me. This is way bigger. So I said to my team, I said, what are you guys doing? And there were 7 people in the team, and 5 of us chose to leave. That decimated a domestic violence team, and the skills and the expertise that left that organisation Christmas Eve last year was incredible.
There's a bit I want to unpack in what you've said. So you mentioned coercion, and that the coercion you were feeling around the mandatory vaccination was similar to the coercion you were discussing with the men in the program. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what the similarities are?
So we talk in domestic and family violence about coercive control, and coercive control is a subtle manipulation of another person in order to get what you want, basically. So you may not be physically holding them down to do something, but you're doing things that would suggest in their mind that they have to obey you, or they have to comply to you, or they have to do what you say, or you will do something else. So it's a subtle manipulation, really. And domestic violence is grounded in it. Men will do things like, for instance, an example, I had a man who had a wife and a child, and she was pregnant with her second. And he said to me, he said, when we get in an argument, I just grab the car keys and I hide them. And I said, what's that about? And he said, well, I take the keys to the car that's got the baby seat, so I know she can't go anywhere. So that was an intentional control, but it wasn't an overt act. Like, he would just put the car keys somewhere and she thinks she's lost them. She'd say the next day, I can't find the car keys. Where are they? So then she thinks she's going crazy. So when I started to point out what was driving that behaviour for him, he sat in group one day and sobbed. And he said, I did it. I did it intentionally. I wanted her to know that she couldn't do anything without my permission. And when he started to realise that fact, I could see a change in him, because he was starting to put himself in her shoes, which often these men just can't do. So when we talk about coercive control, there's so much subtlety to it. A man might have his own little stash of money that the woman may never know about. That's coercive control if she doesn't know where the money is. So there is a lot of ways that men will do that, and we will, see that in them. And so I saw that in my workplace when I was told, people are scared of you, they don't come to your office, you're not the nice person you used to be, and you're too vocal. Telling me those things makes me think, oh gosh, I'm going crazy. What the hell's going on? And people don't want to come and speak to me. I've never been unapproachable. So the coercion in their language was there.
And would you say that the mandatory vaccination is coercion?
Absolutely. And this is my personal, I guess, disclosure, is that I lived in Africa for 6 years and never took an anti-malarial because I didn't know the long-term effects of it. I worked in the prison and never had a Hep B shot because why? I don't know the long-term effects of it. And the prison said, that's fine. We're not going to make you do it. We'll just document it so you can't go work cover if you get Hep B. So, I was never seen as a threat to clients, so to speak, because of the choices I was making. And so when you get told, well, if you don't have this, you're a threat to clients, I could not make sense of it. And then when I said to them, so can I come back as a client if I need you, if I'm homeless? And they said, oh, absolutely. And I said, do you know what you're saying?
And do you see coercion as being that you're going to lose your job if you don't get vaccinated? Is that a form of coercion?
Absolutely. If you can't earn if you can't earn a livelihood and you can't feed your family or pay your bills because you won't be manipulated into taking a medical procedure that isn't proven, that is unsafe, then absolutely. I mean, I've worked all over the world and I've never been told I have to do the one thing I had to do to come back from Africa to Australia was have a yellow fever shot. That had been around for, 50 years plus when I got it. And there was enough data to say that I felt okay about that. But that's really the only thing I've ever had to do in order to travel and work. But to not be able to work in a place that for the time I was there, I could sit in my office and do my work or go into a group or do whatever. But suddenly I was a threat to the staff, like to the clients. I couldn't quite make sense of it.
And you've talked about your workplace, but if we consider it on a governmental level, where the federal government still says they haven't mandated vaccines and it's people's personal choice, is that a form of coercive control? Because coercive control is generally less easy to see. It's not as blatant as a whack in the face, generally speaking, or something where someone ends up with a bruise. It's things done through coercion. So though the statement is that it's people's ability to choose, things have been made so difficult for people. So where is your actual choice in the matter for many people, I would imagine?
Yeah, well, there is no, well, for me, there was no choice in the end, because my body is what I put into it is my choice, and I chose not to put something in my body that they wanted me to have, so I walked away. And when people say to me, oh, I had no choice or I'm going to lose my job, I'm like, well, my way up was my health or my job. I mean, that to me had no, that was a no-brainer for me. And I've thought, why was it a no-brainer for me and not for other people? Like, I have really gone down a deep path of reflection, trying to work out if there was something innately wrong with me. See, this is another thing about coercive control and gaslighting. You start to question everything you believe. And I'm like, well, maybe it would have been okay to get it and keep working. It's a very, the path of reliving this thing and the trauma it's created is quite profound. It's like going through the flood, losing everything, and how do I rebuild my life? How do I reinvent myself? How do I become, how do I do what I love to do but I can't do?
Can you speak a little bit more to the trauma? Because I do believe people who have stood up and said no, or they want more time, or they want more information, or they want more data to make their own decision, have been traumatized. I think by the majority have been, because of the way the rhetoric and the division, and there has been a lot of vitriol towards people who haven't felt comfortable or even questioned, even just questioning, and the effects of that on people. And because you are familiar with that from a domestic violence lens. And do you see that as similar? Can you talk to that and what happens to people, like what you're talking about, where you start questioning and second guessing yourself?
Well, it's exactly, as I said, with women in a home where there's violence or coercive control. I mean, you constantly question, your own beliefs or and blame yourself for their behavior. You do that. And then it's almost like the crazy making phase. You go crazy thinking, oh, what do I need to do to make this right? And so when a woman has been in trauma in a DV relationship for so long, they lose all their sense of self. Like they lose their own identity and they become this person that you're walking on eggshells and you never feel safe and you're always on high alert and everything you do is questioned. So when I think about what I experienced in the workplace in the last, and really it got bad in the last 4 months, it was so traumatic. I'd walk into work every day and then to be told that such and such isn't going to come to your office because they're scared of you. I'm like, it just, that is traumatic to me. I'm a people person. I love people. I've worked with people for many years. I have a bunch of kids. I've got grandkids. Why would you say people are scared of me? Because that's a trauma in itself. And so I was constantly on this high alert. And then I didn't know when the axe was going to drop. I didn't know when, if I was in a domestic violence relationship and this is just a pictorial of think about being in a room and there's a room with trapdoors all in the ceiling and there's sandbags sitting above every trapdoor. He walks in and he has control of those trapdoors. You don't know which day, which moment, which time that trapdoor is going to open and the sandbag's going to fall. And that's how I felt about my job. I knew they were going to do it because the fearmongers were creating it. I just didn't know when and I didn't know how. And I was petrified about my future. I was scared. I said to my husband, we don't have anything. I'm not old enough to stop work. How do we do this? We still have a daughter in the house. Our lives are we need money. And so I think the trauma was about the uncertainty and the not knowing when the axe was going to fall. And they kept saying, we'll review it or we'll do a survey or we'll do this. There was never a clear answer till it was on the Friday, the 18th of December, I think it was, the Friday afternoon before Christmas at 4:00. They did a Zoom meeting for the whole organisation and announced it. So I had no job Christmas Eve. That was how it all played out. And I don't think that it's easy to get over the trauma and because you're also dealing with grief. I mean, I've talked to people that have lost their jobs and they're so sad. The grief of what we've done that we love to do and we've done for a purpose all our lives, suddenly we can't. For what reason? You can't make sense of it. So the grief combined with trauma is really, I think we're going to see a lot of, over the next few years, people really suffering with mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you mentioned gaslighting. Can you talk more about, unpack it for people that don't know what gaslighting means and then how it looks right now?
So gaslighting is really that, again, that crazy making thing that happens and that you're told or you perceive a certain things happening. And for me, the gaslight, I perceived that, yes, they are consulting and they're doing the right thing and I'll have a chance to have my voice. So I believed that when it came down to it, there was no way. They were already planning their steps to get this over and done with and get people out. And in a domestic violence relationship, it could be something as simple as the car keys when I talked about them, or a man, changes things around in the house and the woman comes home from work and she says, well, why did you change it? He said, I haven't changed anything. I haven't done anything. It's how it was. So you start to then question your own reality. And this is in the space of what the organisations were doing, was that I was questioning my reality every day. I thought, and I didn't know who else was on the same page. So they kept everybody separate. So I had no support for a long time. I thought, am I the only one that thinks like this? So that's gaslighting, when you think you're the only person in an organisation of 130 people that thinks this way. And I only found people by accident. I mean, I knew the people in my team, but I would go out for a walk between the buildings, and on the grass, sometimes people would be sitting there having lunch. And I just went past one day and I handed a flyer to someone, and this fellow said, are you? And I said, yeah. And he just wept. He wept. He said, I thought I was the only one. And so this was another way to manipulate people, keep them all apart. And I said to them, to HR, I said, you need to tell me who's not getting this thing so that we can support each other like you've let everybody else support each other.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't do that. Can't do that. I said, well, you've got a register of who's got it and who hasn't. They wouldn't do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you think the terms that were thrown around really early on, right-wing extremists and anti-vaxxers, is that a form of gaslighting, would you say? Is that connected, or is that slightly different?
I would say yes, because you start, I mean, anything that makes you question your own beliefs and values is a way to, gaslight you, thinking that you're going crazy. And so using terms, then, I mean, if it labels you, then other people know the label and they can treat you differently. Okay.
Well, that's what it was. I think that's why those terms were used. So that was what made people like this man that you're talking about, like yourself, not able to just go and say, this is how I feel, I'm concerned about this, how's others feeling, to be able to have upfront conversations where we normally would be able to, and say they're bringing in this policy or they're talking about this. You'd normally have those conversations with your colleagues, wouldn't you? But there was something, the way they tarred anyone raising even a question right from the start. It was already coming out straight away that you're an anti-vaxxer or a right-wing extremist, and that language was endlessly used, not just a little bit. So I wonder about that, because then it means that it isolates for sure, and it means that people are seen in a particular way when they do raise their...
I mean, the fact that they said I was the HR manager, people are afraid to come and see you. Please. That is such an awful thing to say.
And what was she referring to? Why was she saying that?
Well, because I'm too vocal.
Because you were talking about it.
And the reason why I was vocal is because I cared. I wanted people to do their own research. I wasn't going to say, you need to do this. I said, here's information, please just go look it up.
Well, that's fascinating, isn't it? That you're trying to just talk and raise concerns and raise dialogue, and that is construed as dangerous, or as fear. You're too frightening to talk to. That's a very it's an interesting thing that they tried to do.
And interestingly enough, part of the when I say the fear-mongering crew, the ones that were pushing it, one woman had a brooch which was the shape of a syringe and said fully vaccinated. And I went up to her and I said, I'm deeply offended by that, and I don't think that's appropriate for the workplace. Guess who got talked to? Me. And all I was saying was that I don't walk around saying I'm vax. Like there was very much a them and us, and and our group was very small. So they felt they could do whatever they said, anything to us they want to make us feel whatever way we want, like that, because we were just a thorn in their flesh. It's
interesting. So you've had 5 out of 7 in your team that stepped down or were fired.
So we had to choose what we wanted on our separation certificates, and the choices were serious misconduct, not suitable for the position, or the other one was something like not forming to company policy or something or other. There was 3, but the better of the 3 was not suitable for the position. So my separation certificate has a cross in the box that says no longer suitable for this position. Okay.
So the first one was serious misconduct.
Yeah. I could probably find them and email it to you. I'll send you a copy of it. There's 3 boxes and you can see, but serious misconduct. I mean, some people were being, not in our organisation, but others were put off serious misconduct, which caused a problem for Centrelink because they wouldn't get paid Centrelink for 12 weeks or something on those grounds.
What would you say? 5 out of 7's a lot? A lot within all the industries, within the welfare industries that I've heard about. Why would you say that 5 out of 7, when they're working with men and the male perpetrator program, is that connected to why such high numbers? They were all women, or was there some men in?
No, there was men. So my theory is, and I spoke to the CEO about this, and I said to the CEO, we work with men. We talk about, coercion, manipulation, gaslighting. We talk about that every day. That's our bread and butter. And the people in my team all said to me, I'm not going to be coerced and manipulated and bullied. I just won't let it happen. And so, we all had strong beliefs, obviously, about our health. However, we had an extra layer because we weren't going to allow someone to do to us what we're talking to men about not doing to their partners. It just didn't seem like we're talking about. I mean, I reflected again on this, and this is integrity. It's our word. If I went and got the medical procedure as a result of coercive control, right? Not because I was afraid of any virus, which when I speak to people, most of them said, I only got it to keep my job. So if I'd gone and got it to keep my job, and the way I got that was through that constant propaganda and bullying and constant relentless fear mongering, right? If I got it under those circumstances, and then I go and talk to men about, your partner being constantly on eggshells and constantly, you're putting things in her mind, questioning, and you're, coercing her. If I got the shot and went and did that with men, I think it's an integrity thing. I actually feel like it's not, put the health issue aside, it's an integrity thing about the way they were trying to get me to do something that I didn't want to do. It did not make sense to me. It still doesn't. I still reflect on it. I still get very sad about it because I don't understand their thinking to get me to a place.
Not connecting up the dots, not connecting up what's happening to people, and then what the work is meant to be. Yeah. With what would you say to people in the sector that are still in there that are concerned, that are increasingly, they may have thought, okay, look, I can do a couple of rounds of something, but as this keeps on being drawn out, and there may be some people who are going, I don't know how long I can keep doing this. I'm concerned about what I'm seeing. Is there anything you want to say?
I guess what's really important is that the powers to be know that people aren't doing this for their health. Like, they need to know the reason people have done it, and they've done it because they couldn't earn a living. They can't feed their families, pay their rent, their mortgage for cars, whatever. Now, if we all stood up, the people that have got the medical procedure, if we all stood up and said, if 70% that got it didn't get it for health, then why? We've got to send a message. And I think, I really believe that huge march in Canberra sent a big message. And I think the government went, oh dear, lots of people aren't happy. And, we're seeing devastating health effects. I mean, I have a very, very close friend, a young man who has myocarditis, and his cardiologist said, you've probably got 5 years. It broke my heart. He's 31 years old. Yeah. How can that even be? And that's, our young people are going to be decimated by this because they're the ones that probably fell for it the most.
Well, they're the ones who wanted their freedoms back as well. They wanted to be able to get out and live like how we've all been able to live when we were young, and do the things, travel, have a life. Yeah.
And it's not happened, and it won't happen.
No.
And that's why we all have to be united. And people that have had the shots, people that haven't, we all need to be together, because I know for a fact that every person I have spoken to that got it to keep their job, not because of their health.
Yep. Yep. And that is coercion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything we haven't covered?
No, I think it's been fine and covered well. I mean, I certainly feel or believe that we've got to keep doing the work. I mean, I need to be still doing the work. I mean, the other thing that was very interesting was that I spoke to an organisation recently in the last 48 hours, and I reached out because I want to be able to offer my services in some way, but I don't know how, because everything's government funded, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they had no idea why I left the organisation. Nobody has said anything. This is another issue. Why are you keeping a secret that people have left? Is there a shame factor involved? I don't know. But I wanted to make sure my name is clear, that I didn't just walk out on something that I've been invested in for years.
Yeah.
Because I think that was a real blight on the organisation, that they've just said nothing to anybody.
Well, that's very clear that it wasn't according to your wishes that you needed to leave the organisation. So, yeah, well, we thank you. I think everyone that has stood up in this time with integrity and compassion needs a lot of deep thank you, because it is the only thing standing between us going full ball into what is being unleashed, or being able to reclaim and have something, a more just and compassionate society and way of being. I mean, the fact that now there are 5, you've only got 2 workers left in a team of 7 who were, helping men and helping their families, to try and get through domestic violence situations in the best way possible, so we can have healthy, happy families. And the fact that we've now lost skilled, very caring and very ethical workers is an enormous issue within the whole sector. But thank you for all your efforts, and it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you. So thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.